I am back. I couldn't stay away from long. It's such a great crowd here in Rapid City, South Dakota, Freedom Fest 2021. And our next topic is very, very, very important because liberty and independence are inextricably linked. And America's energy independence may now be in peril with the current political climate. Now, back in the 1970s, American energy independence was thought to be an impossible dream. But with the emergence of shale oil and gas fracking, that revolution, America became energy independent in September of 2019. And now, according to the IEA, the US is back to being a net importer of oil and petroleum products. It's going to import more this year than it will export. So in about 6 months, the US has gone from being energy independent on its way to becoming energy dependent. So the question is, are we on the brink of a US energy crisis? Well, our next panel is hoping to address that, whether there is a balance between fossil fuels, traditional carbon energy, and green new energy, and what will the future of America look like? So to discuss this, we have leaders from a spectrum in the energy sector. First up, let's welcome John Engel. He's the COO of Gulf Coast Western, which specializes in the exploration, development, and acquisition of domestic oil and gas. John. All right. Scott Melby is the Executive Vice President of the Uranium Energy Corporation. That's a US-based uranium mining and exploration company. And Scott is a 36-year veteran of the nuclear energy industry, having held leadership positions in major uranium mining companies as well as industry-wide organizations. He is also the CEO of Uranium Royalty Corporation. Scott, come on up. All right. Next, I'd like to welcome Ron Filer. He's a senior executive of the Hornet Corporation, which is an independently owned and one of the fastest growing Tennessee oil production and gas companies. Ron Filer. And last but not least, Tommy San Miguel. He's the president of SGR Energy. That's a heavy fuels blending and distribution company with a proprietary blending technology to incorporate cleaner burning fuels and blend stocks. All right. I'm going to join you gentlemen over here as we dive deep into what could be a looming energy crisis. And John, I'd like to start with you because during his very first week in office, President Biden rejoined the Paris Climate Accord and canceled the Keystone XL pipeline. And just yesterday, he approved the continuation of the Nord Stream pipeline connecting Russia and Germany while hampering US efforts. We also have the EPA promising to impose a slew of punishing regulations. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission is making it harder to permit natural gas pipelines. When you look at this context, are you concerned that the US could be on the path to another energy crisis?
Well, that's a very good question. I think certainly given what the Biden administration does seemingly in every aspect is they're going against anything that makes America productive. Now, the industry itself has done a phenomenal job of adjusting to those regulations. As a matter of fact, if you look at any oil and gas company's website, it's almost entirely focused on environmental protections and look how good we're doing to protect the environment, rather than look at all the success we're having in making America energy independent. So I think as far as an energy crisis, yes, they could keep imposing and imposing more and more regulations. The industry does a really good job of adapting to those and working around them. And you know, again, we're gonna kill the Keystone pipeline, but allow pipelines elsewhere. We're going to stop drilling here, but anyone else in the world can drill wherever they want. We'll have to keep making adjustments, but it could result in an American energy crisis if they get so oppressive. But I think at this point, I mean, the amount of oil and gas that this country can produce is staggering when we're allowed to do it. And if the government would just get out of the way, keeping in mind that every one of these energy companies, most of their workers, most of the people live in the areas that they're drilling the wells. They take extreme measures to protect the environment, protect the water table, protect the air. Each state that there is an oil well in has its own version of the EPA, and they will go around with little FLIR cameras looking for any kind of vaporized organic compounds that might be leaking from the tanks or from any pipelines, and these companies are on it and they fix it. So, you know, the technology that we have today, America could be, again, one of the biggest producers of oil and natural gas on the planet if the Biden administration would just get out of the way. But at this point, I don't see an energy crisis coming. I do see higher oil prices for all of you. It's going to result in higher gas prices at the pumps, and that's unfortunate. But as far as being in the oil industry, as long as we're able to produce oil, when Obama was in office, the 8 years that he was in office, oil averaged $86 to $88 a barrel over an 8-year period. So, and I think you all remember that. So I think everyone in the room has that to look forward to, if nothing else. But hopefully we don't go into a severe crisis based on just pure regulation.
Well, hopefully not. Let's get some insight from Ron, because it's not just the Biden administration, it's a global concern with the ESG narrative being pushed. And in fact, you've got several groups warning that there is already a crisis point when it comes to dwindling investments in oil and gas. I want to cite a report by the Boston Consulting Group and the International Energy Forum. That is an organization that represents energy ministers from 70 nations, including the US, Canada, China. And they're saying that without substantial new investment, world markets, not just the US, world markets could be short 27 million barrels of oil per day by 2022. A report by Rystad Energy says that the world is on track to run out of sufficient oil supplies to meet its needs by 2050 if there isn't more investment and development. And it's not just in the US. What is your outlook?
Well, first of all, thank you for allowing us to be here, because this is way better than a Zoom call to see all these faces. So thank you so much. I'll say this, that this is a repeat of what we had. John talked about it during the Obama administration. And we just have to get out there and keep fighting. The regulations are in place. They're not going to change. All of us up here have to adapt. We have to fight. We have to drill. We have to keep America independent. We have to invest in oil. I don't think the investors have gone anywhere. I think there's some investors that are scared. But I believe the investments are out there where we can become not dependent on anyone else. And we have enough oil here. Everyone on this panel has a way to get it out of the ground. And we have enough oil. And nothing's going to change. So we can wake up in fear every day, or we can get out there and we can drill and we can get more oil and not become dependent on all these other countries and all these sources. I mean, I've been in it a long enough time where I've seen the roller coaster, and it happens in every administration. The first couple years, they're taking care of all the boosters, they're putting all the regulations into place, but we keep fighting, and some of those will disappear. But in the meantime, we're not going to lay down. We're going to go out, and everyone on this panel is going to go keep what we're doing. And there's a lot of you in this room that are going to invest with us and keep drilling and keeping the oil. At the end of the day, you can Google it, look it up, but you look at 6,000 items that we're dependent upon from the time you lay down at night, from a pillow to brushing your teeth, even the Anthem Film Festival. If you get on there and look, movie film comes from petroleum. So at the end of the day, we need it. We're going to go out and get it. And I think everyone on this panel would agree that we're going to make sure that what you just mentioned does not become a problem in the future. Thank you.
Well, Tommy, we are, though, seeing institutional investors heeding to ESG concerns, and they don't want to invest in oil and gas companies because they have to be politically correct and accountable to shareholders or investors that have taken to heart this narrative of staying away from oil and gas. From your perspective, what are you seeing?
Yes, no, I agree. And to Ron's point, you know, we've all been in this industry a long time. I remember in December 98, when oil got down to $10 a barrel, and it was difficult for every time we cranked up a truck, we lost money. In 2008, oil went from $145 to $30 a barrel. That catastrophic drop made everybody upside down for at least a 6-month period. But I think that what we're in right now is a little different situation, because you've got, we do have an administrative change which has changed policy, but almost has sort of waged war on oil in our own country and taken what, you know, we currently have, energy independence, and reverse that trend. And you see the power of OPEC just over the last few months increasing. You see inventory levels at Cushing at 7 years, below 7-year average, at 7-year lows. And so, you know, which if oil continues to decrease, you're going to have to import more oil, which is going to give OPEC more power, which is going to reduce American independence on foreign oil, on our own oil. So it's a little different, and you know, I get that we don't want to wake up in fear, but I do have concerns, because I've seen some catastrophic changes in the industry, and I look at when you have lowering inventories, you've got what's going on with Exxon, with Shell, and from a little different perspective, you know, where we're more of a downstream, midstream oil energy company with pipeline and terminaling assets, as well as, you know, supplying fuel to power to utilities and the marine industry. You know, the wind of change I see over the next 20 years is you're going to see not only a lot more foreign oil coming into our country, but you're going to see a lot of the American companies that currently own pipeline terminaling assets that supply your fuel are going to be foreign companies, not American companies, and that's a national security concern to me. So there's a lot going on here that I think that, and when you, like I said, when you look at these inventory levels going down, and I think there's an assumption that, you know, when the economy gets back to 100%, we're going to be back where pre-pandemic was. I don't necessarily agree with that. I don't think we know what 100% capacity is for our economy, and I'm afraid, along with, I think similar to the reports that you referenced, that in 2022 and 2023, we're going to find out that consumption now is significantly higher than we anticipated.
And to Ron's point, oil isn't everything. It's not just what powers your car. It's not just for electricity. It's in a range of products. Scott, I'd like to bring you into the conversation because you're coming at this from a very different perspective as a leader in the uranium industry. And nuclear energy, which was once vilified, is now gaining acceptance as a cleaner, carbon-free energy source. It actually takes up a fewer land space than any other energy source. Still has big perception challenges to counter given some past tragic events, Chernobyl, Fukushima. But coming at it from the nuclear energy perspective, what is your outlook on America's energy landscape?
Well, I agree with all of the panelists that America is blessed with so many energy resources, whether it be wind, solar, coal, oil, gas, or nuclear, and we should embrace policies that make the best use of all of that. And I guess we're fortunate in the nuclear energy industry in that we're an energy source that is now embraced by both sides of the political spectrum. We've always been part of a Republican, all of the above energy strategy, but we've always been opposed by the left. The fact that we are carbon-free, clean air, energy, our safety record, despite those very high-profile events, we have the lowest fatalities measured by kilowatts of energy produced of any energy source, comparable to wind and solar. The carbon emissions comparable to wind and solar. But where we differ from wind and solar is those energy sources at best run 25 to 35% of the time. So what are we going to do about the other 70%? And nuclear is an excellent source, already is a big part of our energy mix. We're 20% of the energy supply in the United States, but we're 55% of our carbon-free emissions. Globally, we're 10% of global energy needs and a third of carbon-free energy. And this is important as, okay, it's one thing for the green energy arguments to come from Europe and now land in our country through the Biden administration. But what are developing countries going to do? And there's an excellent example of Germany has spent hundreds of billions of euros on a green energy economy for the last 15 years. What have they achieved? Their electricity prices are 50% higher than neighboring France, which relies on nuclear power. They're relying on dirty lignite coal from the old East German mines, and they have a growing reliance on Russian natural gas through the Nord Stream pipeline. So again, I think the United States, we have the ability here to not go down the same path as some of these other countries. I mean, California, closer to home, they want to have all electric vehicles by 2035, but can't deliver electricity to homes and businesses in 2021. That's a problem. And it's coming to your state too. So, one of the things that we're seeing that's really exciting is some of the leaders in the tech industry like Bill Gates, Peter Thiel. Bill Gates' TerraPower Advanced Small Reactor is siting a 300 megawatt reactor in Wyoming to Warren Buffett's PacifiCorp Power Company. It's going to be sited on the location of a coal-fired power plant, which is being retired in the coming years. So the Biden administration talks about, oh, well, we're going to put coal workers to work, making solar panels. Well, that's just not true. That's not accurate. And it's not fair. But here's one example where we can put folks that are being impacted by this historic energy transition and put them to work either mining uranium or producing clean, reliable power from nuclear energy.
All right. Well, John, the narrative, again, is that oil and gas are environmentally unsound. But people don't take into consideration what does running on electric batteries mean when you're drilling for lithium, when you need silver and copper, and the environmental concerns that go into getting those resources. In fact, there's some concern that we don't have enough natural resources on the planet to transition completely away from carbon and fossil fuels. And I see you nodding in agreement, so maybe you can expand on that. And more importantly, tell us how we can counter that narrative. How do we get things back on track?
Well, I think, first of all, you mentioned a few industries, but think about food. When's the last time you saw an electric John Deere tractor out in a wheat field or a corn field? The food industry, the production of all of your agricultural equipment runs on oil and gas. This entire stage and these lights and these curtains, half of the stuff in this room would not exist without oil and gas. So it is if not data recently surpassed it as the most important commodity on the planet, but it is still right up there. Half the stuff I'm wearing wouldn't be around. You couldn't power your cars. You couldn't power. We need nuclear energy. You consider the fact that the Navy has no problem putting nuclear reactors on aircraft carriers and submarines, which are floating targets for every one of our adversaries, but we can't have nuclear power plants in safe parts, non-earthquake prone zones to power our country efficiently and not depend on wind or solar, which, by the way, you need oil and gas to make a solar panel. It's again, you need oil to lubricate these giant wind turbines that kill the birds. If you think about, Greenpeace should be our best friend, because what we used to, light our homes with back in the early 1900s? Whale oil. Killing whales to light your home. So we've saved so many whales in the oil and gas industry. The Greenpeace should be one of our biggest backers. Think of, we used to heat our homes with wood. You used to heat your house with firewood. How many trees would we have left with 330 million people in America? You wouldn't have any trees left. We've saved trees, countless trees. So I think the oil industry is here to stay because every other industry is so dependent upon it. The groceries getting to your grocery store, yes, they can come up with an electric vehicle, but how are they going to power it if they create an electric-powered semi to get your groceries to the grocery store? How are they going to do that without oil and gas, without more natural gas, clean-burning natural gas power plants, and without nuclear energy? It is the simplest idea to make us so much more successful in the global economy if they would just get out of the way, look at the science, and let us do what we do. We're not going to ruin the environment. We take huge safeguards, just like I was mentioning earlier. The water tables. Yes, do you know that oil and gas is a naturally occurring substance? It seeps out of, it's called seeps. Have you been to the La Brea tar pits in California, if you're from California? Oil Creek in Louisiana, where Pennzoil started, was oil flowing directly into a creek. And they were like, hey, let's drill an oil well here. That's how it started. It's a naturally occurring substance. There are areas of the country where you can drill a water well, and if the gas table is close enough to the water table, you're going to have natural gas flowing into your water well. It's science. It's going to happen. But the oil companies go to extreme measures to protect every one of those aspects. The air, the workers, the people that live nearby, the water is all stringently regulated, and rightly so, but the companies take it upon themselves even more so than the regulators do. So back to your question. I kind of went off on a tangent there, but I think the oil industry is here to stay if we're allowed to do what we do and go out and produce American oil and American natural gas, and then bring in nuclear to power our homes and fuel the electric cars that still need the oil industry to make the electric cars.
All right, Ron, energy is crucial to the economy. John just covered that very thoroughly.
No, I don't think I need to add
industries.
anything to it. I think he did a great job. I just want to know who brought an electric car here. Are they still looking for a place to plug in? They might make it by next week.
Well, look, Tommy, there's room for all of these energy sources, arguably. It doesn't have to be to the exclusion of the other. The thing is that we don't have to rule out oil and gas at the pace that it's happening, nor rule it out entirely. So what do you think is going to be the right balance, percentage-wise, say, in 10 years' time? What would make sense?
Well, I mean, that's difficult. That's difficult to say, but I agree with the sentiment. I mean, oil's not going anywhere. It's certainly not going anywhere in my lifetime. Oil's in everything, as Ron pointed out. And when you talk about the electric cars, right? People ask us all the time, well, if everybody's driving an electrical car, what's going to happen to oil? And I tell them, well, that's great for us because we sell, a big part of our business is selling to power plants, selling oil. You still, to make electricity, you either need nuclear, or you need natural gas, or you need oil, or you need coal, but that's less and less consumed. But you still need it. You still need plastic, you still need rubber, you still need other chemicals that are made from oil. It's not going anywhere. So, I think you're going to see, obviously, nuclear is going to expand and grow, but, as he mentioned, when you talk about hydro or solar, it's limited. It's only, you're only talking about a small capacity over time. So we're going to need oil until we come up with a technology, and maybe someday we will. But these, zero carbon goals over the next 30 to 40 years are not going to happen. They're not going to happen. I don't care how much Exxon or Shell or any of these companies say it's going to happen. It's not going to happen. These are goals that maybe should be stretched out 50 to 70 years.
So, Scott, again, it's about perception. It's about misinformation. It's about countering narrative, something that the nuclear energy has dealt with for a very long time, but seems to be getting things on track.
Yep.
So how does one address this challenge and get America back on the right energy track?
Yeah, I feel for what the oil and gas industry is going through because, we've suffered from misperceptions in nuclear energy for many years. I mean, as I mentioned, safety equal that of wind and solar in terms of injuries or fatalities. the clean air energy aspects of it. But we've got to do a better job of communicating that and getting it out there. But again, we don't lose hope on the oil and gas side, because at the end of the day, we're going to need all these energy sources, and let's make the best smart use of them. Nuclear energy at 95% capacity factor looked really good during the cold spell went through in the United States earlier this year. It's very resilient through all sorts of weather, whether it's drought, hurricanes, polar vortexes. So we've got to just do a better job of communicating and overcome the misperceptions. I know a big one in nuclear energy is the waste. What are we going to do with the waste? Well, we're an industry that through our entire history, all the way back to the 1950s, we've kept and contained and safely stored every gram of waste our energy source has produced since the 50s. And if that sounds like an unbelievable task to deal with it, the volume of that waste would fit on the size of a football field. So whether we go to a geologic repository or we do what we should be doing and recycle that spent fuel into new fuel, it's not a scientific problem, it's political problem. So again, let's prove the anti's wrong and deliver clean, reliable electricity and be an important part of the mix. I think the reason why the left is really embracing us is I think they're realizing that wind and solar probably can't work without reliable backups like you have natural gas and nuclear represented here. So let's continue to get the message out, and I think there's a bright future. We don't have to go down the path of Germany or some of these countries that have failed with their energy policies. We can still do the right thing.
All right, well, on that note, unfortunately, we are out of time. We're going to have to leave it there. But gentlemen, thank you so much for sharing your perspectives with us. John Engel, Scott Melby, Ron Filer, and Tommy San Miguel. Appreciate it. Thank you.